Okay, welcome everybody to the final session of TMF week. I think I might cry. There's a lot planned for our last session. For those of you that are dialing in, we're going to be here for about an hour. We'll allow everybody to fall in before I jump into a little bit of an intro to who we have today. As usual, let us know how sad you are that this is the last session of the week, or alternatively where you are watching from today. What country, what city? Amazing. We've got a really great panel discussion today. Every panel I've introduced this week, I've always said this is the best panel so far. So I'll say that this is the best panel so far of the week. And we've got some really amazing folks from lots of different types of organizations. So we've got some really great perspectives that I'm excited to share with you guys. So again, we'll give everybody a few minutes to fall in. I want to make sure that we don't miss the start. Thanks, Yogi, for the feedback. Fantastic week. Looking forward to the next one. We are as well. Got Franklin, Tennessee. Jamie in East Pocono. Sounds exotic. Anybody else? Where are you guys coming in from? Let's see if we've got the full gang here. All right, so in the interest of time, what I'll do is I'll push forward. Again, all of the sessions for this week have been recorded. Most of those sessions are available now. If you navigate back to the agenda, you'll be able to see those sessions in underneath the session title, as well as any handouts or PDFs of the slides. So if you want to use that content to do some training internally, you can. All attendees of the conference will receive a certificate of attendance that will be sent after the event. You can add that to your LinkedIn profile or your training record, whatever you feel like. This is a panel discussion, so it's not a presentation. It's not a sit and watch, although that's what you can if you want to, but it should be interactive. So if you have questions for the panel, if you have your own commentary that you'd like to add, please throw that into the Q&A or into the chat. Myself, as well as Paul Fenton, who is moderating the session, will be reviewing that, as well as all the other panelists. So if you do have questions, please throw them into the chat. So let's get into the presentation, or let's get into the panel itself. So as I mentioned, we've got a star-studded cast of individuals that will be leading today's panel. We have Paul Fenton, who's the president, CEO of Montreal, of course, who you've probably seen multiple times this week on a number of different subjects. We've got Brenda Brown, who is the Director of Trial Master File at Pfizer. We have Piyush Dham, who's Associate Director of Global IT at Covance. We have Sarah Dean, who's the Director and Global Head of eTMF at ISI. And then we have Jamie Toth, who's the Senior Director of Clinical Systems and Records. We will be tackling a really great subject today. What does the next generation eTMF system look like? So we're going to be dreaming a little bit today. So with that, I'm going to add in all these wonderful people. Hello, wonderful people.
Hello. Hello. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So with that, I will hand it over to Paul, who's going to be leading today's panel to introduce and kick it off. Thank you, Paul.
Great, and thanks, Oliver, for organizing. So I'm really excited to have such a great group of people around the virtual table. I know all of you quite well, and I know that you've got a lot of knowledge that you're going to be able to share with the group today. So next generation eTMF, it's really quite a big subject because there are so many different aspects that we've been talking about over the last week in terms of things that we would like to see in the future within our eTMF systems. Now, to get things kicked off, I'm going to actually start with a poll where I'm going to ask you, the audience, out of a list of different choices, what would be your #1 pick in terms of TMF functionality for your next generation system? What would be the top of your bucket list? And so I'm going to ask you to answer that poll. And I can't, unfortunately, see it. Otherwise, I would read out. Yes, I can. So number one is document clustering and visualization. So how we organize documents together, creating relationships. Number two is AI-assisted artifact identification and indexing. So leveraging AI to be able to identify a document and then after start to extract that metadata for us. Number three is TMF risk scoring. So that's obviously a big subject at the moment. Number four, TMF logical health check and anomaly detection. So trying to detect issues within the TMF as a whole prior to an inspection, for example. Number five, truly accurate completeness, and accurate should be underlined. Obviously, we all do completeness today. Very rarely is it accurate. And therefore, you know, we need new tools for that. Continuous remote inspection tools. So that's obviously something that a lot of people are experiencing now, remote inspections. Number seven, sponsor CRO, real-time TMF interchange. That's quite a mouthful, but obviously a really important subject, interoperability interchange. Number eight, stronger integration with QMS and CTMS, so the operational systems and connecting those things together. Number nine, online data collection and forms. So if we think about TMF, we use a lot of forms, right, in the artifacts that we collect. Maybe we should convert them into electronic forms that we can collect that data directly online with. And then finally, maybe something completely different that we haven't really thought about. And if you do have something completely different, please put it in the chat, and that way we can see what you're thinking about, and then we can also potentially address it during the panel. So how are we doing, Oliver, in terms of responses?
So we're doing quite well. We'll give everybody a few more seconds. There's definitely a clear winner. I don't think you guys are going to be surprised. We'll give everybody, for those of you that are frantically trying to look for the polls, if you go to the right-hand side of the screen, there's four little icons. It's the third icon over next to the Q&A, which is called polls. If you click there, there's just one poll and you indicate the response that. So I'll repeat the question very quickly. So which of the following next generation eTMF features would be at the top of your eTMF bucket list? I'll give everybody maybe 5 more seconds. Okay, I'll read out the results for you. So in order, largest to smallest, the number one feature that people would want to see in the next generation eTMF is truly accurate completeness. Surprised, panel?
Nope.
Not at all.
Okay. The next is online data collection and forms. Interestingly, 11.
I'm actually surprised at that one. Yeah.
Which is interesting. Closely followed by continuous remote inspection tools, and then the rest of them are sort of a bit of a spread. So the clear winner here being truly accurate completeness. Paul, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Well, are you ready, panel? Yeah. So let's talk about completeness. So it's really interesting, completeness, because obviously we've all got our eTMF system. We've all got that percentage, right, that shows up, percentage complete. And a lot of people, like they look at that and it's like gospel, right? But in reality, it's very rarely accurate. And why is that? Because we're kind of missing a lot of information to be able to accurately know what we actually should have in our TMF. And a lot of the times that I've looked at systems, quite often the way that we manage completeness is by using placeholders, of course, and then also sort of uploading manual document counts. So we sort of rely on teams to provide information in terms of how many of each document they think they should have, or we hopefully get that information. So it's not a great situation. It's kind of very manual. It's very error prone, and quite often that information doesn't make it up to the TMF, and the TMF teams end up doing a lot of chasing. So I'm going to put it out to the panel. Like, first of all, today, how do you guys manage completeness? And then more importantly, how do you think we can do it better? How can we solve this issue of inaccuracy?
I think there's several. This is Brenda Brown from Pfizer. So I think there's several components that feed into it, Paul. A couple important ones, or a couple important notes to ensure we have completeness, is conducting those comprehensive TMF QC or content reviews. Because a lot of times the metrics are only indicators, and it's more like you don't know what you don't know until you really complete that review to see what may be missing, etc.
Yeah.
So.
No, absolutely.
And what, for us currently at ASI, we're doing a series of questions in the beginning of the study to identify how that study is set up, the different, components that will be the phase, the product, the design of the study, that will then trigger those placeholders. But as we know, things change during the conduct of the studies.
Right.
Things increase, your protocols. So I think, where in the beginning it's good, and those questions really help lay at least a picture and a framework of what we think is going to happen. But it's how then to manage more effectively all the bumps along those roads, and how do you keep that completeness up to date and changing it as your avenue changes and the road changes that you're going down with the studies.
Yeah, those are great.
Right.
And to keep so to also do those checks to the other systems, like to the CTMS, if a trip report isn't auto-filed into the eTMF, did the monitoring visit happen, and is the trip report filed? And if so, then it should be uploaded into the eTMF. So those constant checks contemporaneously as the study is moving along its life cycle needs to be done. So it's not just oh, where's it at today, but it's where's it at today plus did all those other things get checked as well.
Right. Where's it going? Yeah. How about you, Piyush? What do you guys do at Covance to try and manage completeness?
So at Covance, what we try to do, of course, we based off of our milestones, and then we are kind of constantly checking to see how our completeness is going on with documentation based on when SLAs were met for documents that had to be in system, or when with the document creation dates, and then how quickly are the documents being uploaded into the TMF. So
you mentioned an important.
we have tried to.
Sorry.
We've tried to kind of improve that by doing a lot of integrations with source systems that would allow documents to flow in automatically as soon as documents get created in those systems. And then there are QC checks done on those systems.
So you mentioned three things that I think are really important there, Josh. You mentioned milestones, and you mentioned integration with the source systems. And milestones, I think, for me, are key to solving this issue. Because if you think about what a milestone is, it's something that we've achieved, or something that's happened in the study, right? So we've like if you have a site level milestone, well, the site has been initiated. That's something that's happened in the study. It's a milestone, but it also means that we should, based on that milestone, have a certain amount of documentation for the initiation, and we should also expect a certain amount of documentation for the next phase, which is probably getting the site up and running for their first subject. When it comes to milestones, I think everybody has milestones, be it in their CTMS or in their eTMF, and probably both. But I'm not sure how granular they are today. At the most basic level, it's kind of startup, conduct, closeout kind of thing, right? And then it maybe gets a bit more granular. But one thing that I've been thinking about is, instead of having just milestones, why don't we think more about events? So things that are happening throughout the study. And these events could be triggered from other systems. And so this is where the system integration piece is important. So if you think about what Jamie was saying, monitoring visit report. So in your CTMS, you're managing your monitoring plan and your monitoring program, and then afterwards you have you know, a monitoring visit that occurs. Well, that's an event, and if the TMF knew about it, well, number one, it would know that it would expect to have a monitoring visit report probably within the next 15 days or so. But also, it would know that maybe there's going to be another monitoring visit in 3 months' time, because that's what's defined in the monitoring visit plan. So if we were able to have a system whereby we can work more on events and have more granularity around those events, maybe it could be easier to actually generate the placeholders for the things we know we're expecting, and also the things that we may expect in the future based on that particular event. And I think that if you look at the reference model, we've started to do something like that, right? We started to go through and define processes and milestones and connecting the milestones to the processes, but we didn't really go that far. And I think that there's a really interesting opportunity to actually explore that further and start to really get a little bit more granularity around events and processes. And you know, this idea around having maybe a standard process model. Great. Now, it kind of brings me into another area which is sort of connected, and that's the whole concept of clustering. So I think that this is also something that today we have a hard time clustering artifacts together. And if we think about the way that artifacts are organized in the reference model, you know, they're kind of siloed in different functional areas. They're not clustered together. So I wanted to ask you guys, have you been able to start to put in place the ability to cluster documents in your systems? And if so, you know, how's that working? Is it working well? And you know, what kind of approach have you taken? And if you haven't, well, why? You know, why haven't you been able to do it? Or is it something that you're just not really thinking about right now?
So, hi, Paul. This is Brenda Brown. At Pfizer, actually, yes, we're calling it relationships instead of clustering. Right. So, yeah. We actually implemented that technology into a recent release that we had of Pfizer Trial Master File, or PTMF, we call it.
Right.
So, and it's working. I mean, thus far, it's working well. Yes.
And Brenda, that's great that you're doing it. Mm-hmm. But how did you define the clusters or the relationships?
I think it was really based on document type. I will say that I'm not the SME that built those relationships, but I mean, it's based on document types and their association with other documents. So
okay, so like for example, you have like an ethics submission letter associated to an ethics approval letter.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So that's a really good first step, right? Of creating those relationships between documents.
And it aids in completeness. I just want to say. Absolutely. So along those lines, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you have the submission letter, well, you know
exactly
to expect the approval, right? So
yes.
Yeah.
So,
and plus, I think also, you know, when you're looking at that information, well, you want to look at it together, right? You want to see, well, when did they submit it and when did they get the response back? And in between, were there any, you know, requests for clarification, for example?
Exactly. Yep.
And so, that's interesting. Anyone else managed to start to work on relationships between artifacts?
So I will say it's something that was occurring prior to my starting at ASI, at least probably quite a long time ago. Within the system, much to Brenda's point, it was called relations. You know, you would kind of connect the documents if they were submitted together or played, you know, as part of a submission package. It's not something that really was continued, but, you know, we are going through some TMF transformations here within, you know, my internal organization. And that is something, at least on my personal roadmap, to think about. And to, as we start to get over some of the hurdles of you know, looking at our processes and what we're doing, to start to build that into it as well, because very much to Brenda's point and to yours, Paul, I mean, it's very much foundational to the completeness of your TMF. And so many of the things that we do are package of documents, you know, things interrelate to one another. I mean, even back to what you were talking about events, it is something in my past life where we looked at breaking things up into events, and it actually became such a tangled web because, you know, you think about this one thing, you're like, well, how do I break this event up to be singular? Because actually this plays into that event and plays into that event.
Exactly.
And it's just, you know, so many things interrelate, and it's such a package and interrelation that is going to be a really key part to where we go in the future, to make sure that we have better completeness and understand those relationships of the documents.
And so I'm gonna put Jamie on the spot, because I know that she obviously is on the steering committee of the reference model with me. Jamie, do you think there's a case for establishing a standard set of relationships, maybe within the reference model, where we can sort of create that as a starting point for the industry, so that they can then start to implement that?
Yeah, I think that would be a great initiative. We can start to say, you need this before you have these 5 things, and this might be the package that goes together. I think that would be an awesome initiative to begin, Paul. And perhaps some of the folks who are listening today might want to join that initiative, because we always need volunteers to do the activities, right, on these subgroups. So.
Exactly. So we did spit our pitch for the reference models. That's no, I think it could be. I think it would be very challenging. And I'm sure that you've seen that. You know, it's not always that clear cut, and it's not always the same thing. You know, but I think that it could be a starting point.
Right, and certainly, even if we looked at, you know, just zone 1, and you know what picked artifacts in zone 1, and then what else has to be there, and just start small. They're trying to tackle the entire reference.
That's a good idea. It's a good idea, zone 1, because obviously in zone 1 a lot of the documents are the plans and all of that stuff, which kind of then dictate everything else. So I think that's a really interesting starting point. And I know that we had done some work over the last couple of years where we were trying to sort of define a model, a process model, with all of the different processes and the relationships. And as you said, Sarah, it becomes this kind of crazy spider web. But one thing that we realized when we were doing that is that you need to kind of start high level. So start high level, and then afterwards you can start to develop different areas in more detail. And then you also need to have flexibility, because obviously different studies are designed differently, different organizations work differently. We don't have a definitive set of artifacts that we should have in the TMF, right? There's no list that exists from the regulators, apart from obviously our favorite section 8, which we all know is inadequate. But I think that there's definitely an interesting case. Great, good feedback. So let's maybe move on to another subject. So I am actually going to maybe go with choice number 2 from the audience, which was online data collection and forms. And this one, I think it's so my background when I first started in my career was in data management and biostatistics, so sort of developing systems around that area. And so obviously in data management, there's a lot of forms. You know, we have CRFs where we collect all of the clinical data, and we do edit checks on those forms to make sure that they make sense. You know, the data is cleaned as it's being entered. And so when I've been thinking about you know, the content of the TMF, obviously there's a whole bunch of emails, and then there's a whole bunch of forms, and then there's a whole bunch of documents, and then there's some data that kind of arrives eventually. And so I was thinking, well, wouldn't it make sense if instead of us having these, you know, PDF forms or Excel files or Word documents or, you know, those kinds of things that we distribute to the sites or to the clinical team, maybe instead we could have like an online form system similar to EDC, where we could actually build out these forms electronically and then have people populate them, or have them populated as well with data that's coming from maybe other systems or from the TMF itself. And I think that this kind of approach, if we took like the data management EDC type approach, it means that not only could we run checks on that information as it was being entered to make sure it made sense, but also that information is very structured then, and we can actually use it to do other stuff. we can do reporting on it and all sorts of things. So what are your thoughts? I mean, am I sort of pie in the sky, or do you think that there's actually a possibility of doing something like this? Anyone?
I mean, that's the holy grail, right? I mean, if you were to get to something where you can abstract everything into data, then you can do lots of things and speed up processes, quality, and also recreate the form as it existed, as you wanted, as you went along. So, and it does remove a lot of redundancy of data collection and re-entry of data points from one system to another. So, yeah, there are, I strongly feel, a lot of systems and mature processes like data collection management, standards that are in place that can be applied back into the TMF world.
No, I agree. Yeah, I think. Sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's one of those things that's very exciting to think about, but also gives me a lot of nerves as well.
Oh,
just
yeah? Okay.
Because I think there's a lot of things that, additional things and checks and just to be sure, to your point, that the data is clean and, the data integrity is maintained and PHI and all of that goes into it. But I do think that is a very exciting thing to think about and even to explore. With sites, I think about timeliness. One of the biggest issues with timeliness is getting documents from the sites. And how do you know when you receive that document? And do you do it by document date or do you do it by receive date? And then how do you check the accuracy of those and ensure, that you really are getting documents contemporaneously throughout the study? So I think that could help to not fix, but help to be a resolution in place to have and know that your documents are more timely if we have them, just the data going into a form, when that data was uploaded, and it'd be easier to manage that part of it. But so I think it's exciting, but there obviously are just some nerves and other considerations that have to be made. It's a whole other avenue of things to look at and compliance and checks, but I think it definitely is an exciting avenue.
I'm thinking also about things like, trackers, right? We love trackers, right? We have trackers all over the place. And, you could do something similar, because today, we have trackers and eventually, some of them end up in the TMF, right? They have to. And quite often it becomes a bit of a nightmare because you've got this versioning issue. Because it's like, at what point do you put the tracker in the TMF? And then if you then update the data in the tracker, well, you have to produce another version and another version. And you get this big, long list of trackers for different dates. So I think just things like that could be really interesting to sort of try and provide, the functionality in the system, which allows you to enter the data directly in the system and in a database, rather than having this Excel file that you try in PDF, which is, a feat in itself, right? And then try and store it. So I think there could be some mileage, but you're right, Sarah. We need to be cognizant that it's not straightforward, and I think there's a lot of things that we need to think about.
And I think this is Brenda. I think it's important to kind of meet in the middle. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It can be some.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think that's important to, I think people think, oh, well, that can't be the scenario for everything. That's understood. Completely get that. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like Sarah said, that would be part of that assessment. But knowing that you're not necessarily reaching for everything, but you can get some is preferable and would definitely help.
No,
it's also the adoption. I think that will be challenging, right? For something like this, it's always adoption of something new.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, right? We've, I like
well,
to just
interesting, so trackers have been around since I was at a CRO, which is, at least 5 years ago. And we were like, oh, we got to get rid of these trackers. Even when I implemented an eTMF 5 years ago, or actually more than that now, but we got to get rid of these trackers, but they're still around, and they are living beasts because we all love Excel. So I love your idea of let's track it in the system. And I think, one thing that we're doing at Daiichi Sankyo is looking to track the periodic review that's done. because right now it's being tracked in a tracker, and then it gets loaded into the system. So we are putting in some workflow and automation to do that tracking in the system with Audit Trail instead of having to into the Excel file and saving PDF and uploading. So it's
Pfizer as well.
Identifying that use case. Yeah. Rolling that out.
So you make a good point. There's your TMF processes that you could also use this approach with, and then there's your your sponsor or CRO forms that you're using to actively manage the study, and then eventually also sites. I know that at one point there were some initiatives with like 1572s, for example, where they were trying to get away from that PDF form and having like an XML format to be able to create those kinds of things. So people have thought about it in the past, but I don't know what happened to that. I think it just got left in a corner somewhere. But I think that there's definitely some interesting use cases here for this kind of thing. All right, let's move on to something else. So I'm looking at the list here. So remote inspections. So I'm going to do a poll with the panel. Out of the four of you, have any of you experienced a remote inspection in the last year?
Yes, this is Brenda. I have. I've experienced remote and on-site, so yes.
Right. And you have too, Jamie?
Yes, and our remote inspection was with the PMDA, which originally would have been in person, and they asked to see a document, and you have to find the document and then flip the monitor around. And this was inspection where they were just in the system and looking at the records.
Right. So you had to provide them access directly to the system.
Yeah,
MHRA as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say MHRA. Yeah. We provided them direct access.
Right. Yeah. But I think is there a difference between providing them direct access when they're on site and you're sitting in the room and you can kind of see what they're doing, and sort of providing them direct access when they're at a distance and they say, okay, I want to have access for the next 4 weeks? No, not really.
I would say it's less stressful if you're not in the room with them, that's for sure.
Okay.
I mean, the stress, you can have the stress freak out, because you're not like face to face.
Right.
And you're just you can then run reports and Audit Trail to see, where did they go in the system. But
right, that was going to be my next question. So you're able to see what they're doing.
Yes,
I run logs every day. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. And do you have sort of, because in the old days when you'd have like on-site inspections and they would come with their little paper like form of like documents requested. Do you know what I mean? That form?
Yes. Yeah.
How does that work in a remote inspection? How do they ask you for documents if they can't find them?
There's still a control. Sorry, Jamie. There's still a control room or a control group that's working. We have an inspection readiness team, and then there's others obviously included in that. But they generally run that. So as the requests are received, they process them with the appropriate key stakeholders.
Right.
Yep.
Same thing. They control what it is, and
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you think about your recent remote inspection experiences and your solution that you currently use for eTMF, would you say that you had all of the tools you needed to be able to satisfactorily conduct that inspection with the inspector? Or are there things that you would have liked to have had that you didn't have that would have made it easier?
Paul, I don't know if it's just me. You're breaking up. I apologize.
Sorry. As you can see by the antlers behind me, I'm in the country, so sometimes the internet isn't so great. So I'll say it again. So based on your recent remote inspection experiences and the current system that you have, the current eTMF system, is there anything that would have made the inspection easier in terms of the features of your system that you don't currently have today? So are there things that you would like to see in terms of features to support remote inspections? And it's okay if there isn't.
Yeah.
No?
And from my experience this past year, year and a half, no. Yeah.
Okay.
I think every agency is different too. I mean, obviously, in how they conduct the inspections. Like Jamie was saying, the PMDA usually will ask for something and then you show them on the screen. And the MHRA has and continue to get direct access to the system. EMA as well. So
maybe an avant-garde. Great. I'm going to ask maybe an avant-garde question. So if we think it, in terms of the future, and obviously there's sort of discussion around sort of continuous evaluation of clinical trials and sort of clinical programs, right? So moving away maybe from this sort of classic phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 type scenario. Do you think there would ever be a situation in the future where the regulatory authorities would say, well, we would like to just have constant access to your eTMF, to the final records, so that we can do constant evaluation of how you're running your program? Do you think that would happen?
I don't know. that's a tough call.
Resource. Yeah. Depends on their resource, right?
Yeah.
In the past, we had to give actually share access, and typically our SOP says that the inspector role would have access for a certain period of time. So we had to keep checking on having QA check with the agency to he's going fishing. So we had to have QA check with the agency to keep confirming that they still required access, and they did. And so he had access for like 7-8 months. We were every day run reports. So it was about 8 months, and finally QA said, "Okay, you can remove the access," and we were all like, "Oh, thank goodness."
Must be quite stressful,
yeah, it was interesting, and I'll tell you, that was back in 2018. That access was for that long.
And just to add to that comment, Paul, as well, when we give access, it's to a specific study. So it would be awfully difficult and obviously challenging to say, okay, you're going to have access to our system and you're going to have access to all studies. I don't think that would.
No, I don't think so. No, but I'm just thinking if you were in that, if things evolve in the future and there is this sort of continuous evaluation, then it wouldn't necessarily be giving access to a study, it would be giving access to a program kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that if that were to happen, it would become very challenging, and because obviously you'd have to be inspection ready all the time. That's a challenge. So interesting.
Thankfully, I just don't think that the agencies probably have the time and the manpower to be that focused on the TMS, because I think ultimately, while some might want it, just because after maybe the inspection and the findings are like, they want to keep an eye on us, but I don't think they would even have the time to do so. I don't see that even coming in the future, just from that aspect of it.
No, I agree. So I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about some new technology. So artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it's kind of a buzzword, right? At the moment, everyone's kind of talking about it. It means different things to different people. Sometimes it's not so easy to understand what it is. But I wanted to get your sort of opinion and ideas or experiences even around AI. I think that there are some obvious use cases. So things like indexing. So being able to identify a document and then index it. Maybe do some Alcoa checks on the document. Is it legible? Is it if it has page 1 of 10, does it actually have 10 pages? Those kinds of things. But also I think that it can maybe also open the door to allowing us to identify the context of documents, and especially I'm thinking around email. So everyone pulls their hair out when it comes to email, because we have lots of it, and we just, oh, it's correspondence, right? We just file it with correspondence and hope for the best, you know. And I think that there are algorithms out there that are used in other industries that can actually look at a document, an email, analyze it, and understand, well, this email is, it's from this site, it's in relation to this subject, so it's about a waiver, it's, to do with inclusion criteria. This person at the sponsor responded, and this is the outcome that they gave. And being able to extract that context and then making connections with your TMF, so making sure that that correspondence shows up at that particular site when you look at that site, or shows up when you're maybe looking at the protocol and you want to see all of the waivers. All of these things that happen quite often in email today. It would be amazing if we could maybe extract that information in a more useful way. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that's something that would change your everyday lives, or is it something that would be useful?
Absolutely.
I know this is one of your favorite subjects.
Yeah, it's my favorite topic. So emails that come in and have an attachment, right? But the body of the email is really just, here's the attached tracker, or that contain all the key decisions, right? And it's really the tracker or that attached file that has to go into the eTMF, not the the email that carried it in.
Right.
Using AI to kind of maybe at least take a stab at the relevancy of
right.
email that comes in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think about other industries, right?
Yeah, I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, AI is actually advancing very quickly in terms of its capabilities. And so I think that, there's definitely the capability. It's more a question of how do we adopt it, and then also how comfortable are we with that, with the knowledge that the AI is surfacing. Are we confident that it's actually detecting the right things? I know that we've got a technology guy on our panel today.
Yes, we do.
I'm interested in hearing his thoughts on AI within TMF. Is it something that we should be looking at? Is it, are there other things?
Most definitely. I mean, as a tool that helps or improves efficiency, compliance, AI definitely has a big role to play, especially in the eTMF world. And there are strong use cases for that, right? We've already seen some vendors also kind of come out with their AI bots that do basic level classification right now, but some of the more complex use cases that you're talking about of text extraction, etc., still challenges there due to multilingual documents and the consistency you need to kind of go, and then the training algorithms themselves, that the amount of data that it needs to really train the AI engine to actually do the job right, and that's the challenge there, the volume of data that's needed to make these processes very useful. But I think the industry has started taking baby steps towards it. In fact, not only AI at Covance, we are also using business process automation to mimic eTMF users to go and integrate to systems that don't allow integration or are still in use, and it's a standard set process, manual process that you just pull in data into. So in conjunction with AI, this will become very useful in the eTMF.
Yeah.
But we still have some ways to go there to get.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been thinking a lot about AI recently, and so training the algorithm, training the AI is obviously super important, and it takes time. And actually, it also takes humans. And humans, in my opinion, play a really important role in implementing successfully AI algorithms, because the AI is really only as intelligent as the humans that feed it. in my opinion. And I think that it is something that we need to start to look at, but it's going to take time for us to get to the level of confidence that, you know, we can load, you know, like a whole bunch of documents into the system, and they're just going to be automatically identified and filed away, and we don't have to do anything. I don't know even if we'll get to that point. I think there'll always be some kind of interaction by humans. But what I do think it will bring us is the ability to focus our people on much more value-added tasks of looking at this is what the AI is saying, does it make sense? And so using the knowledge that all of those people have of, you know, all of these years of managing TMF and managing studies, and actually leveraging that to improve the accuracy of the AI through looking at the results and then confirming, yeah, that's correct, and that's not correct. And I imagine that's some of the stuff that you're doing right now, Piyush, right? Is trying to get that sort of retroaction from the humans back into the algorithm.
Right. So AI will plug into the workflows, so where the AI makes a decision and then you route documents appropriately based on confidence levels, and that's where I see it. The good thing with AI is because it's such a standard commodity now, with, you know, Amazon, Azure, all having their AI and training it on volumes of data, that the advances will be rapid, and we will be able to leverage them much faster than we would traditionally.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And there's one thing that's interesting about AI. So there's two approaches. There's the approach where you know what you want. So for example, you know, you load a protocol, you know that you want it to recognize it as a protocol and then index it. So that's kind of, you know, it's prescriptive. And then there's the AI where you don't know what you want. And this is where you're using AI to find outliers, things that just don't make sense. And using like patterns and pattern detection and things like that. And I think that that's something that's also kind of interesting. And we use it today in sort of risk-based monitoring and things like that. More and more we're starting to use, it's kind of like a statistical approach to detect outliers and things that appear to be anomalies or don't fall within the norm. And so I think that that there's also some possibilities there as well. I think, does anyone else have anything they want to say about AI, any experiences,
I just wanted to add one more thing, that it is, you know, going to help with predictive analysis also, a lot of the milestones and things like that, of when they should occur.
Right.
Based on this trial conduct, you can actually start to run an historical data run to say when can you predict milestones to happen, which will probably help with eTMF completeness, etc.
I totally agree with that. I think that we can, you know, we were talking about events and processes and sort of clusters and using this process sort of driven TMF. Having AI reading historical information from TMFs, processes and events and milestones, and then also having humans confirming, yeah, that makes sense, will actually give us a much better way of being able to predict what milestones and what placeholders we need in the future. So that's super exciting. But I think it's a bit like you know, we were talking about training. It's going to take time. It's going to take standards, and it's going to take, you know, this kind of more process-driven approach, I think, to have something like that.
So I was just going to mention in the PD space, the MHRA came out with a guidance on AI. So I think, you know, for case intake and things like that. So it'd be great to hear, you know, if there's any updates to that, but also from the other regulatory authorities of what their take is on AI, because I know a few years back, Andy Fisher talked about that they started to do inspections and able to inspect against AI, right? So things that were processed using AI. So, so it's a great area that hopefully will begin to move faster.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you make a good point, Jamie. On the regulatory side of things, AI is actually quite challenging because you have to be able to demonstrate that you've validated it, right?
Yeah.
It's a system; it has to be validated. But how do you validate something like that? Because you can't always predict what it's going to do, right? It's not necessarily predictable. And so I think that the regulatory authorities are starting to sort of work on guidance around that. And Jamie mentioned in the PV space, which is obviously kind of high, it's a very high risk area. I think in general, it would be nice to have more guidance around how we validate algorithms for AI applications. And I think that all the time we don't have that guidance, we're always going to have a little bit of reticence from industry. The other thing that's also kind of challenging is, and this is especially in your kind of environment, Piyush, where you're working in a CRO, you're dealing with multiple sponsors. They all have their own data sets, which are also training AI algorithms, and those algorithms may be used across sponsors. So how do you ensure confidentiality? How do you ensure that you're not breaching, your acceptable, management of the data with each sponsor? It's kind of challenging. I think it requires sponsors to have a bit of an open mind, but also to sort of opt into something like that. But on the technology side, we also have a duty to explain to them what we're doing with the data. What are we storing? What aren't we storing? And how are we ensuring the confidentiality? And also things like GDPR. So personal information, because obviously there are rules around that too. So it's not without challenges, right, Piyush? But
very true. Amazon just got fined $420 million for using data.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it needs to be a collaborative thing. I think the CROs need to work with their clients and with the software vendors who are providing the technology. The sponsors need to maybe have an open mind about it, and obviously they need reassurances that it's kind of like you're pooling knowledge, right, to improve the overall process for everybody. And so it does require collaboration, I suppose. I'm gonna take it in a slightly different direction, but it's kind of connex. Risk-based approach, risk management. So obviously we're required by regulations to take a risk-based approach when it comes to managing clinical trials, but also managing trial master file. And this is clearly stated in the European regulations. And I don't believe it's necessarily stated as clearly in the US regulations, but I think they have the same sort of thinking process around that. So my question to the panel is, do you guys take a risk-based approach today? And if so, how do you do it? Does your system help you decide, well, what is a high-risk area, or where should we be focusing our QC efforts? Or is it something that you do outside of the system? So I'm thinking of like risk scoring and things like that. Who wants to go first? Do you do 100% QC?
Go ahead, Brenda.
So we do. I guess we do take a risk-based approach. It really depends upon, I guess the status of the study. So with regard to reviews and such, with TMF content review, and then we also do a quality review that's completed by our TMF study owners. But primarily, it's pretty comprehensive. So as long as everybody is doing it we base it on milestones. So, I guess events as well. If it's a significant event, then we would do reviews. But not a huge amount of risk-based approach with completing our reviews and our TMF content reviews or our SSDL quality reviews. So we do 100%.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Jamie. Yeah.
So at Daiichi Sankyo, we are just starting our pilot for risk-based approach. So we have in our system the ability to do sampling, and so we will be beginning our pilot at the end of July, early August for a risk-based approach.
Okay.
Watch this space, October, when you might see me presenting somewhere. You might hear about it.
Okay, all right.
Not my team.
That's a date. That's interesting. How about you, Sarah? Do you guys take a risk-based approach?
No, not currently. We're 100%
Wow.
review from an Alcoa check, and then we're 100% from a completeness check.
Wow.
I think, we do that as sampling from just the TMF side, just to see, how things look. But I definitely think, from my perspective, again, like going through the TMF transformation initiative, it's getting first a handle on what do we want to have happen, and then as we feel like we have a good handle on the quality, the expectations, and the management of those aspects, then I do definitely want to get to a point where we are taking that risk approach. But I think, just in my experience too, it's just feeling comfortable and confident that you have everything you need in place and everybody following those expectations. And I think that's why we see not that many people taking that risk approach, because it's like, not yet. Nope, we have this over here not meeting those expectations. Nope, not yet, just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And I think for me too, coming in on this side of it, I would not feel comfortable yet doing that until I get a little bit more of a better foundation for all the people we work with and the CROs and just internal teams too.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, if the European inspectors start to ask to see this, because obviously they put it in their guidance. But,
Yeah.
So we have 4.5 years of data that we analyze all the different document types and how much touches were happening, and so that's how we were able to formulate, okay, this is what we're going to do based on what we've seen, based on our history, right? Which is something you have to do, is do that analysis and take a look at where you can make the difference. So we've identified those attributes, and we'll start to roll it out, as I mentioned, the latter part of the summer.
Cool. Well, that's really interesting. I think it's great to see that people are starting to put that in place. I think there's also some room for standardization. Sorry, Piyush, go ahead.
No, I said we were doing something similar. The only additional thing that we are doing for risk-based, obviously categorizing documents in different levels, but for documents that are being integrated directly, we are, putting a less priority on those documents because they are being validated through automation and integration. So that's something that I think integration helps as well with some of the risk-based approach.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Piyush. I just wanted to add as well, with regard to the document quality check that occurs, we have a specific group. So there is a risk-based approach for a quality check when a document is submitted to be filed in the TMF. That's different, from the TMF content review or TMF QC that looks at the entire TMF holistically. So yeah,
and I think it can apply in both scenarios. Absolutely. I'm itching a lot because there's a mosquito. I'm being attacked by a mosquito here. Guys, I would love to spend the whole afternoon chatting to you about all of these things. There's a lot of really interesting viewpoints coming out of this discussion, and I'm sure that we'll get to talk about it again in future panels. But I'd like to thank you all for being so open and sharing your knowledge with the rest of the audience. It's been great. I'm going to hand it back to Oliver.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
That was a lot. That was a lot to cover. I was trying to keep up. We went through really great subjects there. I think it's great to see different perspectives, even sort of large organizations, small organizations, and the different ways in which you guys are tackling some of these problems. And it shows that, that there isn't a sort of standard way to do these things. Everyone's applying their own sort of approach to making sure that they can achieve their individual, organizational goals. So I think that's super interesting. Obviously, I'll echo Paul's thoughts. Thank you all so much for spending an hour with us and dedicating, time to sharing your thoughts and brain dumping how you guys do things at your organization. For those of you that I haven't seen speak before, you guys did a great job. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, thank you to the audience that attended today and sort of listened in for the discussion. I guess it goes without saying that I want to thank everybody that participated in TMF Week this week. It was not only an incredibly painstaking process to put together such a large conference over the course of a whole week, but we've had such an amazing group of individuals that have joined us, such amazing sessions, and more importantly, I think we've invited new people to the TMF presentation community. Right? We've had new faces, new individuals that are sharing their perspectives from their own organizations. I think we've given a voice to different segments of the market that maybe didn't have one in the past. So with that, I'll close up the conference. It's a little emotional. We'll close up the conference. Of course, this is our second year. We wouldn't be true to form if we didn't do this again. So we'll be back again next year, of course, and we would love to have you all back, including our panelists today. So thank you again, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thank
Thanks,
you, guys.
Oliver.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Great to see you guys.
So long.
Bye-bye.